Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple of cards using a bunch of ink smooshing to create texture. And pretty much mostly new products from Simon Says Stamps Friend Like You release. I'll have a link to the release in the description box of the video. I've already done a couple of videos using some of the new products. I pulled out a very much loved oldie but goodie favorite. And I used an embossing folder, both sides, because I made 2 cards, because I like the pattern on both. So anyway, we'll get into that. As always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. Just expand it. It's all there. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps, keeps the lights on, pays the bills, enables me to keep bringing out content. And yeah, let's get into making the cards. So the first thing I got to do is create a bunch of panels with ink smooshing. I've shown ink smooshing a bajillion times on my channel using all sorts of inks. Any water reactive ink will work. Distress inks and distress oxide are the holy grail in my opinion for ink smooshing, just the formula of them. But any inks, as long as they're water reactive, will work. And today I'm using Simon Says Stamps Pawsitively saturated inks. And I've got watercolor paper that I showed there at the beginning, just this Strathmore watercolor paper that I love. I love this stuff. And I cut these panels down somewhat smaller than what I normally work on because I'm doing several colors and I just don't need large pieces of it. And I'll have the specific colors that I am using. Right now I'm using violet. I'll have those linked in the supplies. And the big thing to remember with ink smooshing is layers. If you want that texture and that splotchy, speckly, splattery look, you need layers. And to get layers, you got to dry in between. And for the actual ink smooshing itself, you can do this different ways, like using different products. I'm just using a stamp storage sleeve. I call it my ink smooshing sleeve. I literally keep it just for this. The non-stick craft mats work really well as well. I've shown it. I did a comparison in I think one of my live streams, showing using just glass, pressing ink onto my work surface. If you can try it, you won't get the really splotchy look because glass, the ink just immediately turns into a puddle. But again, it also depends on the inks you're using. Some of them just work differently with water. But all I do is I press my ink pad onto that plastic sleeve, spray it with my distress sprayer, and then press it in the cardstock. The nice thing about the plastic sleeve is it gives you a little more control because you can literally see where you're placing the ink. I do both. It just doesn't matter in my world. You can see I'm pressing the watercolor here into the sleeve, Either way works. Whatever works for you. This is something that is kind of fun to do, especially if you don't necessarily have a project in mind or you don't have enough time, to go start to finish, is do some little panels like this with some ink smooshing. Just create some backgrounds, have some fun with it, and then come back to them later and you can stencil over them or die cut them or make that your card background, whatever floats your boat. You can also experiment with doing multiple colors. With all of this, I was doing just one color per piece of watercolor paper, but you can add with this pink one, I was using GUAVA, but I could have added some orange to it or some yellow to it and just, added some blue to it and made that one purple. Sky's the limit. You can have just fun with it. So I kept just working my way through the different colors that I had pulled out. So the second one was guava. This one is honey. And again, I was just using a small piece for this one because I was planning on die cutting my little flower centers from this. And again, layers. You dry in between layers. So I would, press the watercolor paper into the ink or press the ink onto the watercolor paper, whatever, and then dry it. Because wet on dry layers, if it's still wet, the more you keep pressing the wet, ink and water into it, it's just going to blend together and just become a blob. You're not going to get all that texture and the speckly bits and, you know, all of that. So you need to dry between layers. So for this, I was using my little Ranger Heat tool. You could also use your embossing gun if that's all you've got. It works too. It doesn't matter. As long as it's dry. That's all that matters. So for this green, I'm using PEARFECTION. And then off camera, I'm going to do another couple panels of green. I've talked about this. If you're doing a variety of like florals, switch up your greens, you know. We got lots of options, and the more the merrier. So I did Cabbage, PEARFECTION, and Field. So I've got different shades of green for all my flower stems. So I've got all my little panels that I had smushed with ink. And then I'm going to die cut all of these with 3 different floral wafer die sets. These are all from like the new release. So I've got the Tilted Daisies wafer dies, the Delicate Wildflowers, and the Arctic Poppies wafer dies. And I'm going to die cut the stem areas from those shades of green. And then the florals, I'm die cutting from the color pieces, the centers from the yellow. And then for the daisies, I just grabbed some scraps of, I think this was like Hammer Mill white cardstock. And I went to town. I die cut like every open space. So I ended up with even more than I had planned with all of these. So I've got just a stack of die cuts. And this is something, again, it's like if you've got already had some backgrounds in your stash, sit and die cut them when you've got a bit of time. Or if you've got like a little die cut machine, you can sit in front of the TV, die cut. That's one of the things I kind of enjoy doing. It's just like zoning out. I'm like watching other YouTube videos or Netflix, whatever, and die cutting because it's kind of mindless and doesn't take very long. So for these little Arctic poppies, it's kind of self-explanatory. I'm just gluing the pieces onto the little stems because it didn't matter that, you know, I missed parts of the flowers on because all of the green stems, all you're going to see is the stem. And then just gluing the little purple flowers onto those. And then there's the little final sort of layer. And they're so cute. And yeah, such a simple technique, but the texture it creates, I think ink smooshing is just, it's so fun and it's so easy. You know, and it's always going to look different no matter what you do. I think you can use the same color on the same cardstock, you know, do the same technique, but every piece is going to look completely different, and that's fun. So for the Delicate Wildflowers, this one, honestly, I had the packaging to reference because I was like, I think this piece goes with this piece. But then I was like, you know what? I don't think it matters. And it honestly doesn't. It really doesn't. I laid them all out and I kind of like clustered the pieces together and then started layering them. And then that's when I was like, honestly, it just doesn't matter. I had a lot of kind of random pieces because I was moving the die around to like maximize that little piece of pink smushed cardstock. So again, who cares? Who cares? They're cute little flowers. So once I was like, you know, at this point I was like, yep, let's just adhere them. It doesn't matter. So I'm using the Simon's, what is it called? My brain just stopped. Pawsitively Perfect craft glue. The newer glue that they released a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. I've been using it quite a bit. So far, I do really like it. I do really like it. So, adhere the 2 little layers together and then add the little flower center, and they're so cute. And then you just got to attach them to the little stems. And then I'm going to have a little cluster of these as well. So my original plan was to only make 1 card, also reverse tweezers for the win. You know, it's like having little extra sets of fingers to hold things in place. So I can pinch the pieces with the reverse tweezers, let the glue dry, and go on to the next one. So yeah, I ended up with more than I planned. I was only going to make 1 card, and then I ended up with just a pile of all these flowers. So it ends up becoming 2 cards, because why not? So I just worked my way through and assembled my little wildflowers. And then for the daisies, I just die cut random scraps of white cardstock for the actual daisies. And then the flower centers were die cut from that yellow piece that I'd smushed earlier. And then same thing. You just like layer these up. And they're so cute. They really are like the cheerfulest little flower. Super simple to assemble. Layer, add stem, add flower center, done. So I kept working my way through, and getting these all assembled as well. These are quite large. Like, they're not huge, but they are like just a nice size, you know, for A2 cards in my opinion. So this also determined, because I made, you know, so many that I ended up, I'm going to keep a couple back that I'll put on the insides of the cards when they're finished. So once I've got the last one assembled, then I can just adhere the stems, and same thing. You can edit this sort of stuff, you know, snip things off, make them shorter, do whatever you want. It's just paper. It's just paper. So with the stems, I adhered some just as is. A couple I snipped off. One I ended up like, I think not till I adhere it, and I don't show it on camera, but I ended up like just like ripping it off the daisy and then completely moving it to a different sort of orientation just to make it fit. And it's like that's what I love about die cuts. You can kind of do whatever you want. So the embossing folder. This is the Dainty Dotted Daisy. Say that 3 times fast. Dainty Dotted Daisy embossing folder. I love this. I thought it was cute, but actually like running it through with the cardstock, I was like, oh. So that's how it is with the pattern raised. But I really like it debossed, like the back of this as well. Love that. So my original plan was to use the back of just with the deboss pattern. And I embossed like 2 pieces because there's a method to my madness here. So I used Simon's steel cardstock, slate, steel, slate, dark gray cardstock. And the first panel, I trimmed to exactly A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. The second panel, I'm going to knock a 1/4 inch off each side, so it's going to be like 3 3/4 by 5, and it's going to line up with the back pattern. But then this way I can pop that second panel up with some foam tape, but then the pattern continues. So for this one, the pattern is debossed. And then when I realized I had so many flowers, I could do a second card. I did the exact same thing, but this time I flipped the embossed pattern over. So now the one on the left, the pattern's raised. So exact same pattern, exact same thing, but it's just interesting how it just, the looks depending on whether the pattern's facing upwards or backwards. And with so many embossing folders you can do this with, it's just fun, you know? So once I had my like flowers separated there and I'd kind of off camera laid them out, figured out what I was doing, then I'm just adhering them to the slightly smaller gray panel. So went along, assembled the one, did the exact same thing on the second card. And then before I adhere that to the like A2 size panel, I pulled out some twine from my stash and I'm wrapping that around this little panel. And again, reverse tweezers for the win. Hopefully, you go. If you watch my content regularly, if you're new, hi. These are must-haves. Little reverse tweezers come in super handy, and you need more than one pair. Because if you only have one, it gets lonely, it grows legs, it walks off, and you can never find it. Trust me, I could never find them. And then once I got extra pairs, I never lose them. They all hang out together on my desk, and I haven't lost a pair since. Who'da thunk, you know? Anyway, reverse tweezers to hold the knot, made the bow. Just simple. And then I put Simon Says Stamp's Big Mama foam tape on the back of these panels, just to pop them up, give that little extra bit of dimension, and then adhered it on top of the A2 sized background, and then repeated on the second one. And then for my sentiments, I'm using the Easy Strips Everyday stamp. It's not really a stamp set, because that's just one stamp that coordinates with Simon's Easy Strips rectangle wafer dies. Now we've got like a couple different stamps that work with it, as well as like pre-printed sentiment strips. I've used several in videos. I used this one in a recent video already. And this time I'm white heat embossing it onto that same slate cardstock. So I used my anti-static powder tool on the cardstock. That just prevents the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped image. And then I'm stamping the sentiments with Simon's clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to coat that with white embossing powder. I'm going to tap off the excess. And once I've got all of the embossing powder on there and the excess tapped off, remove one random little stray that wanted to be stubborn. I'll melt this with my heat tool till everything is smooth and melted. And then once all of this is melted, you let it cool off. It only takes a couple seconds. And then I'll use my microfiber cloth to buff this cardstock, and that helps remove all that excess anti-static powder because that doesn't look pretty, especially on dark cardstock. So just make sure everything is melted first, let it cool off, and then I take my microfiber cloth, a little bit of elbow grease, buff away all that anti-static powder, and then I can run this through my die cut machine with the Easy Strips rectangle wafer dies. So this will die cut all of this in one pass. And that also means I have way more sentiments than I need for these two projects. I just put all the extra ones in the back of the packaging of this stamp. So the next time I go to use it, it's like, hey, I've got a whole bunch of them all ready to go. So run that through my die cut machine. And then I've got all of my sentiments here just done. Love. It's another thing, having, some sentiments just pre-done just for the time when you do have the time to sit down and make something. It's like, oh, I already have some backgrounds, or I've already got some sentiments. I've already got this. And then you can kind of dig through and put something together. It's what I love about card making, because really you can start to finish a project in very little time, just depending on what you're doing. So my card bases are top folding A2 white note cards, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And on the insides, I adhered one of the sentiments and then one of the extra daisies. And then I'm going to adhere the card front, which is going to completely cover the card base. So get that adhered into place. And then I do the same thing on the second card. And then before I add the sentiments or anything else, I decided to add some splatter because, of course, we're going to. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white gouache. So I'm going to put that on my palette. I put the card into my splat box here, put a bit of gouache onto my little palette. I'm going to thin this out with just a little bit of water, and then swirl that out really good with my fan brush to mix the gouache and the water together. And then once I'm happy with it, I can start adding some splatter. Just cause. So shimmery splatter would have looked really pretty on this too. I almost did like perfect pearl powder mixed with water, but I've decided instead to pull out an oldie but goodie and add some shimmer in a different way. So I added the white gouache, cleaned everything up, let that dry. And then the Flickering Butterflies wafer die set. This is ages old. One of my favorites. It's still available. It is one of my favorite little dies. It's so perfect. And I love die cutting specialty cardstocks and vellums with it. So I die cut Simon's Shimmer Vellum with this. And then all you do is add the teensiest little dot of glue right to the center there, because the glue does show through vellum, but for little tiny things like this, I don't care. And you don't really notice it. So I add the teeniest dot right to the body, and then I press that onto my cardstock, let that dry, and then I've got these little shimmery little butterflies flying around, looking all adorable. I just love them. I love them. I love this wafer die. So once I've got those adhered into place, I had 2 left over of the large ones, which is perfect. Everything just worked. So I'm going to put these on the inside just to completely finish this off. So I'll adhere those into place. And then for those sentiments, I'm going to just pop those up with some thin little foam squares. Just give it a smidge of dimension. So pop some little foam squares on the back of these sentiment strips. And then pop these onto the card fronts. And that's it. The cards are done. This was fun. So, like I mentioned in the intro, links to all of the things are in the description box below the video. You just click on the little part where it says more right under the YouTube video, and that'll expand the description box, and there'll be the supply list and a link to my blog and my social medias and all the things. So you can check it out if you're interested. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting, letting those robot overlords know you guys like what you see, and I very much appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!